I'm a Jew from Kentucky, that's what I am. The good Lord foresaw it with his infinite plan.
Shalom, y'all. I'm Rabbi Shani Abramowitz.
And I'm Rabbi Ben Fried. March Madness is in full force, and baseball season has just begun. So this month, we're talking sports.
Specifically, Jews in sports, and how our contributions and love of the game have played out here in the Commonwealth and beyond.
Joining us to unpack it all is Alan Stein.
Alan Stein was born and raised here in Lexington and is the founder of the Lexington Legends Minor League baseball team. And this is a part of the bio that I couldn't resist including, so please forgive me. When Alan was a student at the University of Kentucky, he led the student activities group and he helped to bring Bruce Springsteen, Jimmy Buffett, and Harry Chapin to campus.
Yes, indeed.
Alan is a longtime and dedicated education and public service leader in Lexington and across the Bluegrass. And while Alan refers to himself as retired, he is still very active in various organizations around town, including the Fayette Educational Foundation and Ohave Zion Synagogue. And Alan, again, welcome to the Schmooze.
I'm happy to be here with you. Good morning.
Good morning.
And Alan, it's good to meet you. It's good to be here with you. I'm Ben Fried. I'm a rabbi over in Louisville. And I'm excited to hear a little bit about Jews in sports. And as a former journalist and avid fan of sports myself, I'm excited to have this chat. So specifically, we heard a little bit of your kind of general bio, but can you give us your sports bio? What have you always been a fan of sports? Are there any formative memories growing up, either as a fan or an athlete, that like kind of got you? When the bug got you?
Yeah, sure. There's a lot of those moments. I was reminded of some of them yesterday as I attended the Cincinnati Reds opener again on opening day. Sort of a holiday at our household. My love of sports started very early. My father was not a great sports fan, but he had some allegiances, and of course, the University of Kentucky sports was amongst them. And I remember, I guess I was about 6 years old. He bought a small Westinghouse, nice little yellow box radio, so that I could listen at nighttime to University of Kentucky basketball and football games, and listen to Kaywood Ledford and Claude Sullivan and those guys. And that was just miraculous to me to be introduced to the sport at an early age. And then at 7 years old, I was staying with my grandfather in Louisville, who lived, and he was a great baseball fan. And he took me to my first baseball game, and it was at the fairgrounds for a Louisville Colonels game. And I was just overwhelmed with how massive it was, and the sounds and the sights and the smells. And not to be outdone, when I got home, as a 7-year-old and just raving about the experience, my dad said, "Well, we're going to Cincinnati tomorrow, and we're gonna go to a big league game." And I didn't really understand, I don't guess, what that was. But we drove up to Cincinnati, to Crosley Field, and I walked in there. The Reds were playing, as they did yesterday, the San Francisco Giants. And my dad had an affinity for those because he was in love with Willie Mays. And so it's 1959. I go to my first game in Cincinnati. And when I walked through those corridors and saw the green grass and the blue sky and the Reds in their bright red uniforms, I was totally smitten. And Frank Robinson, who became that day my favorite player of all time, hit a home run, as did Willie Mays. And I was just hooked from that point forward. And I have been a very, way beyond avid sports fan ever since.
Mm-hmm. And it's something that, you share with your kids and your grandkids. I'll say that this morning is, UK is in the tournament, the basketball tournament. They hopefully will go all the way, and all the kids are wearing Kentucky blue gear to cheer on the Cats, and it's so sweet. And your granddaughter and grandson were both there, and it's amazing, I think, to see the sort of spirit that you've passed on to them in terms of just loving sports, being diehard fans, and having it be just a part of your life.
Well, I can't take all the credit for that. Uh, their parents, Adam and Hadley, both were raised in the sports realm, and they are just as avid as am I. And Hadley sent me a picture of the kids this morning, and Eden's blue and white socks just knocked me out. She looked so great.
When
But
I was
go ahead.
interviewing here in Louisville and also in Lexington, and I know that Shani had this experience also, it definitely was it was fun and funny that, some of our interviews were taking place around March Madness. And so some of the scheduling, right, like that the synagogues had to take into account March Madness for their scheduling really gave me a sense of what basketball means to this state. I thought it was really fun. And then we're in another process right now. And we were talking with a consultant, and he said it was the first time that he'd ever worked with an organization that had to take account for the Kentucky Derby in their scheduling of how they think of, what they can do when. So it's true that even as Jewish organizations that there is this pervasiveness of the fandom of these sports and of the athletic culture of the state.
It's not just here. Yeah, I've been fortunate enough to have businesses all around the country, and it's a universal thing. It's a communal opportunity, and in today's world, I don't want to get into politics or anything, but we're not as cohesive a group of people in the United States as we once were, and the communal experience supersedes all of that other uh, stuff that we have to deal with wherever you are. I have a long time association in Omaha, Nebraska. We own a AAA team there and a soccer team, and I can tell you, and the politics there are incredibly divisive, but not when the College World Series is in town or the Nebraska Cornhuskers are playing. It's universal. It's everywhere. Thank goodness that we have that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank goodness we still have sports. So we all know the famous story. I think we were all probably, raised on the story of Sandy Koufax famously not pitching on Yom Kippur. And I was wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about the role that, Jews have played in the development of American sports, and who are some of the most important Jewish American athletes that we should know about.
Well, when I was young, there was a derisive phrase that people would always say to me. But I was on the football team in high school, and guys would come up and they'd say, the shortest book that was ever written, Great Jewish Sports Heroes. Well, that's turns out that's just baloney. There are incredible number of Jewish athletes who have throughout time been very influential. You mentioned Sandy Koufax, and for folks of my generation, born in the 50s and 60s, there was no greater person in whom we took great pride than Sandy Koufax. And, interestingly enough, as I celebrated the 60th anniversary of my bar mitzvah recently, I read I still happen to have Rabbi Schwab had saved for me my bar mitzvah speech. And so I recounted that speech to the congregation, and lo and behold, there was a Sandy Koufax reference when I was 13 years old. and it was very influential to me. But I came to learn over the years that it went way beyond Sandy Koufax, and one that really struck my heart was the story of Hank Greenberg, who was an incredible Hall of Fame baseball player for the Detroit Tigers back in the 30s, and and his story is unbelievable. And in fact, I should tell you that I bought. I don't buy a lot of memorabilia, but I bought this a framed autograph poster of Hank Greenberg with his actual signature. And it turns out it is probably the most valuable piece of memorabilia collection that I have. And the reason for that was Hank Greenberg, way before Sandy Koufax was even born, uh, did the same thing and wouldn't play on Rosh Hashanah. And they were in the World Series, and it was a big deal, and it was on the front page in Detroit, and he just wouldn't do it. And so there's the great sense of pride for that. But given the times, he was the target of some very vile, terrible, terrible stories, and one of which was that my grandfather told me many times was that he was coming out of a game early in his career, and he had hit a home run to win a game one day, and a little kid came up to him and said, "Hank, can I have your autograph?" And he said, "Yeah, sure." So he signed this kid's autograph, and the kid's father, uh, Rabbi Ben, I don't know if you know this story or not, but the kid's father came up behind him and ripped it up and said, "We don't want any signature from no damn kike." And from that day forward, Hank Greenberg never signed another autograph. And so they're very rare. And I was in Omaha at the B'nai B'rith annual fundraiser, and I happened to be sitting next to the keynote speaker, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And we had a nice dinner. We're talking to each other, and then the auction comes up, and this Hank Greenberg thing, framed deal comes up, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar says to me, he says, "Hey kid, you need to buy that thing." And so I did. But it's in a place of honor in our home. Hank, Hank Greenberg was a uh, great guy to look up to. But there, through so many other sports, boxing particularly, professional boxing in the early part of the 20th century was pretty much dominated in the ring and around the ring by Jewish folks. And, throughout history, and there's so many of them that, you can throw in Mark Spitz and swimming and Olympics. And it's just an amazing, when you dive into it, it's amazing to see and read and hear about all of the great Jewish athletes. And so now today, every time I see or hear anything about a Jewish baseball player, particularly, or a basketball player, or the three coaches that are in the Sweet 16 are Jewish, I send that stuff to my kids and grandkids every day.
Yeah, I think the Hank Greenberg story is one that I mostly grew up in Ann Arbor, Michigan. So being close to Detroit, there's actually a great documentary for those who want to learn more about Hank Greenberg, the life and times of Hank Greenberg. It came out in the late 90s, and it's really worth watching. Another one that I remember growing up, I had a book about, was Mo Berg, who was the spy behind home plate. That he actually was a catcher for I forget which professional team, but he went on a tour in Russia and was doing espionage for the U.S. government while also being an athlete. So there are just so many awesome stories, and it is interesting though that it does seem that like baseball was a big one for the Jews in terms of kind of where our athletes went more than some others. But then what you were just talking about, that idea of, when you hear that there's someone or you hear that there's a Jew, definitely, right? Like sending it to, your friends and your family. Oh, did you hear this person's a member of the tribe? Did you hear this person's Jewish? That there's a real pride. And I think part of it is because, as you said, Alan, this kind of like derisiveness that, in the movie Airplane, when they ask for a little light reading and they, pamphlet of great Jews in sports, that it is just out there. And so we do like to push back against that perception.
Absolutely. Mo Berg, the Mo Berg story was a book called The Catcher Was a Spy, and they made it into a movie, which was really pretty interesting. And
I haven't seen the movie. I'll have to check it out.
Well, you can get it on Turner Classics.
Did you play sports growing up also, Alan, in addition to your, you mentioned you were on the football team.
Yeah, I did. It was not a distinguished career by any means, but I played baseball, from Little League all the way up to high school. And I wasn't good enough to make our high school team. I did play football, and I ended up actually even being a walk-on football player my freshman year at the University of Kentucky. But I can promise you won't find anything anywhere about that. The most distinguishing thing that I ever did in high school, in a football game, Henry Clay against Danville, I was actually returning a punt, and as I swept to the right around and round the corner, and I thought I was going to return the punt for a touchdown, I was blindsided and knocked crazy and fumbled the ball, and my helmet came off. And unfortunately, there is film of me recovering my helmet. That was the highlight of our senior football banquet, being shown over and over again. that was in 1969, so I'm pretty sure that film has probably deteriorated by now too. But that was all I did. I played all the sports. I was quarterback of our football team for AE Pi at my fraternity.
Yes, the storied flag football intramural. I also have some good that was about the peak of my athletic achievement as well, was the intramural AE Pi teams.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I remember when we moved here. Well, I guess I had never lived in a city that didn't have at least one professional sports team, but Chicago, New York, Boston, whatever. And so I enjoy sports. I'm not necessarily the most, up-to-date fan, but I love going to games. And I, wonder, especially around basketball, what was that going to be like? And the first time I went to Rep Arena for a game, I couldn't believe it. It felt like being at a Bulls game. There was so much excitement and energy, and the stadium was packed. The arena was packed, and it was really incredible. It was really, really special. And I imagine that, over time, since Lexington has grown and the athletics program at UVA has grown, that, the sports scene in town has changed dramatically too. And I would love for you to tell us a little bit about how it's evolved over time.
Well, first of all, Rabbi, you probably don't recognize this, but those of us in Central Kentucky take umbrage when we don't refer to the UK basketball team as a professional sport.
Yes, yes, I apologize. That makes sense.
It doesn't get much more than that. But the from a sports perspective in Lexington, it has almost always revolved around University of Kentucky sports, basketball and football. And it expanded beyond that to Danville, for example. The great historic national championship football game between Harvard and Center. Was it 1921, I think, and Center beat Harvard 6-0. That was one of the great games, the game of the century. So there have been a lot of sporting notable things around, but most of it has centered around the University of Kentucky and sports, and of course, by extension, U of L and Western both have historically successful programs also. So sports has always been a major factor in Kentucky. Uh, we haven't had quote unquote major league um, professional sports other than in Louisville when the ABA Kentucky Colonels played. Um,
And we
but
currently have a team in the NWSL, the National Women's Soccer League,
yes,
are racing in
yes,
Louisville.
yes, and the Louisville soccer team men's team is also at a very high level. But in addition to that, though, you expand the definition of professional sports. We in Lexington and Louisville, we are at the very top of the professional racing industry, both racing and breeding, and those are clearly major league sports. So there's been a lot of sports that have evolved over the years. In Lexington, more particularly, there were a number of what in those days were Class D minor league baseball teams uh, throughout the 1920s, 30s, 40s. The Lexington Hustlers were a Class B team in the 40s and 50s. And interestingly, they were the first integrated baseball team, well before Jackie Robinson,
Hmm.
integrated below the Mason-Dixon line. And what's interesting about that was that was a black uh, baseball team who integrated with some white players, Bobby Flynn, Jim Host, and a couple of others. And so there was a great legacy for that. Um, they had a nice little stadium out beyond Newtown Pike, where in the Lexmark area is. And that team folded in the mid 50s. So there weren't any professional sports in Lexington in the Lexington area until the Lexington Thoroughbred or the Kentucky Thoroughblades, a AAA level hockey team, professional hockey team, came to Lexington in the mid 90s, and they were very successful. Actually, they played 5 years in Lexington, and they had, and this was at the very highest level of minor league sports for hockey, right below the National Hockey League. Um, they had the second highest average attendance in the league for 5 years, and they had the highest average ticket price in the league, the highest. And so you would think that those metrics would say, well, they're going to be very successful. Well, they weren't. And the reason they weren't was that the only facility they could play in was Rupp Arena. And Rupp Arena, of course, gave preference to University of Kentucky basketball and all the other things that they do down there, from circuses and beyond. But they were prohibitively expensive for that minor league hockey team to survive, and so they left Lexington around 2000, which was just about the time when we were starting the Lexington Legends, and we had been working on that project. There are a lot of long stories about that, but in 1984, it came to my and a couple of my buddies' attention that Major League Baseball was considering expansion, and if they did that, the article that I read in the Sporting News, the Bible of the day, was that there would have to be expansion of the minor leagues as well, and each one of the major league teams has 6 levels of minor league teams. as part of their operations. And the list of suggested locations to put a minor league team included Lexington, Kentucky at the very top. And so I went to a couple of buddies and said, we should have a professional baseball team here. And I had no idea that it would turn into, anything more than just an advocacy of helping to bring a team here. But that was in 1984. And what we found was that it was a lot more complicated than just saying we ought to have a team. And it took a lot of money, and we were not able to convince the powers that be at the local and or state levels that they ought to build a stadium. And after 15 years, it was kind of dead in the water. And I was in the radio business, and we sold our radio stations in the big frenzy of consolidation in the late 90s. And I found myself at 48 years old with a lot of money and all the time in the world. And I said, the hell with it. I'm going to do this on my own. And I'm going to build my own stadium. We're going to raise the money privately, and we're going to do it. And of course, everybody said, no, you can't do that. It has never been done before. Nobody's ever done that. And we figured out a way to do it. And so we built our stadium. I bought a team. It was extraordinarily successful from the very beginning. We felt like we had built a better mousetrap, so we started buying other teams. Bought one in South Carolina, bought one in Michigan, bought a AAA team in Omaha, and all of a sudden I'm a big mocker and in the baseball world. And that's pretty much how it was. And then as those things go, we were doing very well. And I had a lot of partners, and we had an opportunity to sell, and we did. And, that was supposed to be the end of the story. But the folks to whom we sold the Lexington franchise took a steady march to oblivion from the excuse me, from the day that I retired to their very end. It was really very sad. And so a couple of years ago, I'm at a game with my kids, and one of my children says, Dad, we're not going to come to any more games with you. The melancholy is just too much. We see how sad you are of what has happened to this operation and how wonderful it was. And we all grew up in this, but it's not the same. And unless you do something, we're not coming to any more games. Oh, what the hell am I going to do? Well, figure it out. So fortunately, we were able to help find a group who would reacquire the franchise, and they asked me to put a small local investors group together to help operate it, and that's where we are today. And we are celebrating the Lexington Legends, are about to embark 4 weeks from today as we record this podcast, our 25th anniversary season. So, it's been a fun and long ride, but we're kind of still at it.
And where did you, because one of my favorite things so I love minor league baseball. I grew up, as I said, in Ann Arbor. We'd go to Toledo Mud Hens games. I also went to Durham Bulls games when my family lived in North Carolina. There we have the Lansing Lug Nuts, right? There's all these great names and mascots in minor league baseball. It's one of the great things about it. Why the Legends? How did that happen? And what's the buy-in for the kind of baseball with the mustache who is himself the Lexington Legend?
Let's see. Let me see how much I can divulge here.
You're on the schmooze. You can say anything.
We did a contest in conjunction with a couple of TV stations and the newspaper, and we solicited suggestions, and we got over 600, and not 619, but somewhere somewhere over 600 suggestions for team names. And we kept narrowing it down, took over the course of 6 months, and the public kept voting. And in fact, more votes were cast for the name of the Lexington minor league baseball team than were cast in that year's congressional election. And it narrowed down to first down to 100, and then down to 20, and then down to 10. And the Lexington Legends ended up being the winning moniker. It had to be, because we internally had decided that's what it was going to be. and so, whenever I would do interviews or speeches or anything, I would talk about that and encourage people to vote. And I'd always say, and there's some that we really like. The alliteration of Lexington Legends is one that has really stuck out to us, and a lot of people are voting for that. And go ahead and cast your vote, but whatever. And when it got down to the top 10, Lexington Legends was way, way ahead, and we had already ordered uniforms and logos and done all of the style book things. And we were at the last week before the final ballots were going to be cast. And a TV reporter asked me, what was my very favorite? And I said, well, Lexington Legends has really been great. And there's a lot we can do with that. And we can do a Legends of Kentucky and a Legends of Lexington series and all of that stuff. And we can harken back to the old days of baseball around the turn of the previous century, all of that stuff. But I said, but there's another one that I really kind of like. It was the one that was in 10th place, way behind. It was the Lexington Horseflies. And I said, isn't that clever? Flies from fly ball and horses and all. Well, unfortunately, there was a massive vote for the Horseflies. And it came within 200 votes of actually being the choice of the public.
Wow.
Thank goodness it didn't. And so we didn't have to, undermine the public's view. But the Lexington Legends were chosen. I had a dear friend of mine we had hired as our facilities operations manager. My great friend Jack Scher, who recently passed away, may he rest in peace. Jack had the most incredible handlebar mustache you've ever seen. And of course, I've had a mustache since I was 18 years old. So we decided that the symbolism, that as we designed all of the mascots and the logos and everything, had to have the combination of Jack's and my mustache. And that's how we came to that with our mascot, Big L. That's
great. I love it. I like the Horseflies, though. That you should bring. You should bring that to like a special, like 1 weekend thing. Like, one of I know the Louisville Bats, they renamed themselves the Derby City Mint Juleps and stuff.
Yeah, we're actually going to do that this year. But I got some great advice from one of the all-time greatest promotions persons in baseball history, Mike Beck. Mike was a friend of mine, owned a couple of other minor league teams. And he and I were sitting around one afternoon, and he was sort of a mentor of mine. And I was talking to him about how we were going to name the team and everything. He said, well, here, let me just give you one piece of advice. Whenever you pick your team, think 3-year team name, think 3 years down the road. And your team has just lost their 13th game in a row. And there are 3 guys at midnight sitting around the bar, and they are changing your name. And so if it's Horseflies, it might change into horse something else. You may not want to do that.
Good advice. Good advice.
And the games are a blast at the Legends ballpark. It's so fun. It's so family friendly. We love going. We
Thank
really
you.
love. Yeah. So our last question for this part of the episode is just, are there any Jewish people in sports right now that you are watching, that you feel excited about, inspired by?
Sure. I can tell you, we just signed a player for the Lexington Legends roster this year. His name is David Palmer. He's a Jewish kid,
Oh,
and
wow.
he played for the Israeli Baseball League team. So we're excited about him being around.
Are you going to have him over for Seder in a couple of weeks?
Well, I haven't met him yet, so you don't really, who knows how observant or
Right.
he is. But anyway, I'm certainly going to be reaching out to him. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Bring him to shul.
Oh, cool.
But one of the really interesting stories, I think, is in March Madness, is that there are of the remaining now 12 teams, I guess. 3 of the coaches are Jewish. John Shire at Duke, Todd Golden at Florida, and of course Bruce Pearl at Auburn. So I'm really fascinated by that, and in spite of the fact that I don't really want any of them to win, I want Kentucky to win. When we're not playing them, I'm kind of rooting for them, and it's not easy to do. To root for Duke in any capacity around here.
I feel that.
But John Shire, good Jewish boy. Why not?
Apparently, my dad just sent me a thing that he actually made Aliyah and played in the Israel Basketball League for a year.
That is exactly right.
And so after his college program.
So did Todd Golden. And he played for Bruce Pearl, who in the Maccabi games. So, they're all interrelated.
It's a small world, yeah. And then
of course, we all are. But.
Yeah, we should also mention, of course, Lindsay Gottlieb, who's the coach of USC, who's also still playing Women's March Madness. I saw a great video that was pointing out that she is Jewish and one of her star players is Juju Watkins. So, know.
Unfortunately, Juju
I know, tore her ACL
and won't be able to play anymore. But you're right. I was going to mention that too. So, that's sort of fascinating me these days, I think. But there are always, guys to follow in the big leagues. I think I haven't seen the final opening day rosters, but I think there are 7 guys who have made rosters that are Jewish. We don't have very many football players. There is the occasional Jewish football player, and the one that fascinates me most, and forgive me, I can't remember his name, but he is the quarterback at Brigham Young University.
Yeah.
Yes, Jake Retzlaff.
Yeah, that's right. And he signed an NIL deal with Manischewitz, which I think is just fabulous.
Is so great. I love the video was fantastic. For those who don't know, NIL is the ability of college players now to use their name, image, and likeness to sign endorsement deals. And so Jake Retzlaff, who's the Jewish quarterback of the Brigham Young University Cougars,
and they call him BY Jew. That's his own moniker. He's the BY Jew.
I love it.
Which I just think is so funny.
And just before we get to our lightning round, I just want to tell one quick personal story that I think is appropriate, given that we're doing this for the month of Nisan with the month of Passover. It's the month of March Madness. I said that I'd mostly grown up in Ann Arbor, Michigan, but before that, we lived in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And in 1993, UNC had made the finals of the NCAA tournament. They were playing against Michigan in the Fab Five. And the Monday night of the national championship game was Seder night. And so it was a big question of what people would do who lived in Chapel Hill. And so what my family did was we started our Seder at 3 p.m. so that our Seder was over by the time tip-off was rolling around. And then everyone stayed at our house and watched the game together. So you had back-to-back Seder and then watching the game. UNC won the game. And then we all went out and partied on Franklin Street after that. And it was a big Passover celebration that night.
Rabbi, we had the same discussions in Lexington because Kentucky was in the semifinals against Michigan and lost. Had we won that game that went to overtime, we would have been having the same conundrums here.
So, but I think that's one of the cool things about the American Jewish experience, right?
Yes.
Is the ability to be so embedded in the culture and in the traditions of the places that we are. And, Shani, you're talking about going to the games, and right, that those are experiences where you're getting together and you're connecting with people for this shared goal and shared purpose, and you're cheering on this team together and having that, and then figuring out, okay, how does this fit into our Jewish life? How does our Judaism fit into that? And I know that there are people who, go to Louisville Bats games and get special permission to bring kosher for Passover food in during Passover, and do different things that they stay true to their integrity as Jews, while also staying true to their integrity as Kentuckians and as people who love sports and who love being a part of the communities that they're in.
So we're gonna move into our lightning round, which we do with every guest, and this is just a quick list of questions about Judaism. You're not supposed to think very deeply about them, and just sort of give us the answer that comes to mind first. So the very first question is, what is your favorite Jewish holiday?
Oh, Passover. The easy question. I love Pesach. I love the Seder. Since I was, I don't even know, 17 or 18 years old, my dad wanted me to lead our Seder for the whole family. And I love still doing that.
Hey, amazing.
All right. Honey cake or apples and honey on Rosh Hashanah?
Apples and honey for us. The honey cake is just too much for me to get to. And I hate to make someone else do it.
The best Purim costume that you've ever worn or seen?
Yeah. Well, I've seen a lot of great Esthers in my day. But my favorite for me, I remember it being at the old synagogue and jumping off of the stage as Haman and trying to frighten the little kids. I was probably 10. So yeah, that was my favorite.
I'm just going to say it'd be pretty cool if your rabbi could dress up as the Legends mascot maybe one year for Purim.
Okay.
Well,
just planting the seed there. That could be a pretty fun thing.
But she's up for anything. We might be able to make that work one day.
Yeah, we'll talk about it. Let's talk about it.
When you finish your fast on Yom Kippur, what's the first break fast food you're going to?
It's a long-standing tradition. I gobble down or drink as quickly as I can a little thing of tomato juice. And my mother always had a little plate set aside for my dad and for me as we would come in for break the fast. And the first thing that I would go to would be the pickled herring.
A classic.
I know that's probably not a universal answer, but
I love herring is one of my favorite foods.
Mine too.
So I'm with you on that, Alan.
Mine too.
We're good. Your favorite biblical character?
Well, there are a lot of them, but I think I'll take the easy road and say Moses. The whole Ten Commandments thing with Charlton Heston and the Ten Commandments. And I should tell you a really quick story. At our radio station, Charlton Heston was in town giving a speech for something. And so we got him to come into the studio and do an hour interview with I think Jack Patty, if I remember correctly. And as he was coming, and I found out, I thought, well, I got to go home and get our family Haggadah and have him sign it. I got to have Moses sign my Haggadah. So I did, and he signed it, and he said, nobody has ever asked me to do this before. And so that's part of our family Pesach tradition. Amongst the things that we talk about and the symbols of that Haggadah with
I love it.
Moses' signature to the Steins is an heirloom that I really enjoy.
Wow.
That's
amazing.
fantastic. Wow. As someone I grew up watching the Ten Commandments every year as a family. We had an old VHS that we had, recorded it from when it was on ABC or something. We'd fast forward through all the commercials, and it was definitely a big part of my formative Passover. So that's so cool that you have a Haggadah signed by him. And then our final lightning round question: Hamantashen or latke?
Oh, latkes. Oh my gosh. I'm a potato guy anyway. But yeah, latkes are far and away.
That's great.
We always end every episode with a l'chaim of the month. It's a chance to sort of raise a toast to a person or organization, past or present, that you just want to celebrate and lift up. But we'll give you a minute to think. Ben, do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
You go ahead, Shani.
I am going to give my l'chaim of the month to Coach Pope for coaching an incredible team that hopefully, again, will take us home. So l'chaim to Coach Pope.
L'chaim to Coach Pope. I am going to give my l'chaim of the month to the two most successful athletes in my family, my sisters. My athletic career was cut short due to injuries and laziness. But they both played varsity sports throughout high school and in college on club teams. And it was all like a big part of, for me, what sports was going out and supporting and cheering them on. And that was a lot of fun. And then just to kind of extend that also, I'll give my l'chaim to our NWSL team here in Louisville, who just started their season, to the ladies at Racing Louisville. We're season ticket holders. We think it's a really amazing thing that we have this program here in the state, and they do great work out in the community, and they are role models for the next generation of athletes. And I think it's really awesome.
Well, mine will go to my grandson, Levi. My grandson, Levi, who attends Gan Shalom at the synagogue, our daycare, when asked by one of our congregants what his name was, he said, "My name is Levi." He's now 4 years old, so this was when he was 2. And she said, "What's your last name?" And he said, "Baseball player." And that just really grabbed me. And when I heard that story from my daughter, she also told me that when Levi goes to bed at night, he says his prayers, they say the Shema, and then he sings "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" and ends it by saying "Go Legends." So Levi Parrots gets my l'chaim for the month. It's baseball season.
Amazing.
L'chaim to Levi.
L'chaim to Levi. How awesome.
Amazing. Alan, thank you so much for schmoozing with us. It was really a blast. And hopefully we'll see you at the ballpark soon.
You bet.
That's it for this episode of the Bluegrass Schmooze. Wishing you all a sweet and happy Pesach full of renewal and joy and liberation.
The Bluegrass Schmooze is created and produced by Rabbi Shani Abramowitz and me, Rabbi Ben Fried. Our executive producer is Laura Ellis.
Our social media coordinator is Eden Unger. You can find us on Instagram at Bluegrass Schmooze. Our show is made possible by support from the Jewish Heritage Fund. Our opening and closing song is Jew from Kentucky, written by Dan Byrne and performed by Dan Byrne and Bridget Kalin.
Thanks to Knesset Israel Congregation in Louisville and Ohave Zion Synagogue in Lexington for believing in two young rabbis and helping us make this podcast a reality.
For more information, to keep in touch, and to learn how you can help us continue this work, visit bluegrassschmooze.org.
We're Jews from Kentucky, that's what we are. We drink our mint juleps from a kosher dill jar. Wherever we wander, wherever we roam, Jews from Kentucky is always at home.